It was supposed to be the start of a beautiful chapter in the family's story, a celebration of new life, joy, and connection. Mallory had spent the past 6 weeks orchestrating what she believed would be the most memorable event in her sister Camille's life, a lavish celebration to reveal the gender of Camille's first child. Every detail had been handpicked. The venue was a charming botanical hall just outside of town, filled with fairy lights and soft classical music. She had arranged for a bakery to craft a dramatic multi-tiered cake, its center filled with either pink or blue mousse. From custom decorations to specialty drinks, Mallory had poured not just money, but her time, heart, and hopes into this day. But none of that mattered. She arrived at their parents' home the evening before what she believed was the big event, still buzzing with anticipation. "I can't wait for the gender reveal tomorrow," she said, setting a bottle of sparkling cider on the kitchen counter. Camille, lounging casually with a cup of tea, laughed. "What? That happened yesterday." Mallory blinked, her smile frozen. "What do you mean it happened yesterday?" Her uncle, ever the eager storyteller, overheard and ambled over. "You didn't see the photos?" He pulled out his phone and, within seconds, was flipping through a slideshow. There was Camille, radiant in a blush-toned dress, slicing into the cake with her husband Rowan. A cloud of pink mousse spilled from within, and the crowd cheered. Their parents beamed, her cousins posed in front of a balloon arch. Her mother clinked glasses with her aunt over champagne. Her younger cousins danced in front of a backdrop that Mallory had hand-painted herself. Everyone was there. Everyone. Except her. Mallory's gaze darted from face to face in the photos, searching for any glimpse of herself in the crowd, even a shadow in the corner. Nothing. Her heart dropped. Slowly, she turned to Camille. "You didn't invite me?" Camille gave a little shrug. "I guess I forgot to tell you," she said with a light laugh, as if it were some silly oversight. The room dimmed, or maybe it was just her vision narrowing. The sounds of laughter and casual conversation around her faded into a kind of white noise. No one seemed surprised. No one looked guilty. Her mother was still chatting away, and her father was deep in discussion with Camille's father-in-law. It wasn't just Camille who had forgotten. They all had. Mallory felt her grip on the edge of the table tighten as a strange calm settled over her. Her heart still raced, her stomach churned, but her mind was crystal clear. She carefully placed the cider bottle on the counter, took one last look at the people she had called family, and walked out the front door. No one followed. No one asked why she was leaving. No one even looked up. Mallory drove in silence through streets glowing with warm December lights. The contrast between the festive town and her hollow chest was jarring. She parked outside her apartment and sat in the car, headlights reflecting off the snow-dusted trees ahead. Why hadn't she seen it before? Camille had always been the darling, the golden child. From their earliest years, Mallory had watched her sister receive affection, attention, praise, for doing almost nothing. Camille's talents were celebrated even when they were average. Her mistakes forgiven before they were even acknowledged. Mallory, on the other hand, had to earn her place with effort. Good grades, hard work, endless sacrifice. She had worked 2 jobs to put herself through art school, then took up freelance gigs and built a steady clientele from scratch. When Camille got engaged, Mallory hand-lettered every wedding invitation by hand. When Camille bought her first home, Mallory had painted murals in the nursery. And now, the gender reveal, she had funded the entire thing. And yet, she hadn't even been worth the text. She opened her messages, scrolled to the last exchange. "Mallory, hey, just confirming we're still on for Sunday? Caterers said they'll be arriving early." Camille, "Yep. All set. Thanks again, you're a lifesaver." A chill settled over her. That exchange had been less than a week ago. Camille had known. Everyone had known. Her breath fogged the window as she leaned her forehead against the steering wheel. Somewhere in her soul, something cracked, not the kind of dramatic, loud break of heartbreak, but the quiet, irrevocable snap of a thread pulled too tight for too long. She wasn't family. She was a service provider. And tomorrow, there would be consequences. Let me know when you're ready for part 2, The Awakening, where the story deepens and the protagonist begins severing the long-standing cycle of emotional and financial manipulation. The morning light slipped through the blinds of Mallory's apartment, soft and golden, casting long shadows on the hardwood floor. She sat at her small kitchen table, still in her robe, nursing a cup of tea gone cold. Sleep had eluded her. Instead, she had spent the night replaying every moment, every memory that led to this fracture. The photos. Camille's smirk. Her mother's indifference. She had woken up with a strange sense of clarity, not sadness, not even anger, just a deep certainty that something had shifted permanently. She opened her laptop and pulled up the invoice for the gender reveal event. The final payment to the venue, a hefty sum, was still pending. Her cursor hovered over the cancel payment button for a few seconds before she clicked it. The screen refreshed, and the total reset to 0. Done. Her phone buzzed almost instantly. A call from the venue manager. Ms. Rivers, we noticed the payment didn't go through for yesterday's event. Is everything okay? Mallory smiled faintly. Yes. Everything's fine. I've cancelled it intentionally. A beat of silence on the other end. But the event already took place. I'm aware. I wasn't invited. Click. Next, she opened her messaging app and blocked Camille's number. Then, after a pause, she wrote a single message to the family group chat. Hope everyone had a lovely time yesterday at the event I funded. Since it seems I wasn't important enough to be included, I assume I'm also not needed as a financial crutch. Camille is officially on her own from now on. Good luck. She hit send, muted the chat, and pushed her phone across the table. It felt like severing a limb and simultaneously healing from an old wound. By mid-morning, the messages started flooding in. First her mother. Mallory, this isn't like you. Please call me. Then her father. Let's not overreact. There's probably an explanation. Then Camille, frantic and unapologetic all at once. What the hell did you do? The venue called me. They're saying we owe them or they'll pursue legal action? Mallory sipped her now reheated tea and stared at the screen. She typed back slowly. Oh. Guess I forgot to tell you. Ha. She set the phone down and went about her morning. By afternoon, the real floodgates burst. 17 missed calls. Multiple family members texting variations of the same message, we're family. You don't just abandon family. Camille is pregnant. She doesn't need this kind of stress. None of them said, we're sorry. None of them said, you're right. None of them asked, how are you feeling? The silence around those words was more revealing than anything they could have written. At 6 p.m., as she chopped vegetables for dinner, there was a frantic knock at the door. Mallory didn't need to check the peephole. She knew it was Camille. She opened the door a crack. Camille stood there, her usually immaculate hair windblown, cheeks flushed, phone in hand. You need to fix this, she said sharply. The venue is threatening legal action. You paid the deposit, they're coming after you if they don't get the rest. Mallory leaned casually against the doorframe. Sounds like a you problem. Camille gaped. You paid for it. It was your idea. Mallory tilted her head. Didn't seem like my idea when you forgot to invite me. Camille's voice rose. Oh my God, are you really still mad about that? It wasn't on purpose. I just forgot. That word again. Forgot. Mallory folded her arms. No, you chose not to tell me. Just like you chose to let me keep footing the bill for your life while pretending you had it all under control. Camille's eyes narrowed. You're being childish. You're making this into something bigger than it is. Mallory's tone didn't change. And you're being irresponsible with money and relationships. This isn't the first time. I just finally stopped pretending it's okay. For a moment, Camille was silent. Her face softened. Please, Mallory, she said, voice lower, a touch of desperation seeping through the cracks. I didn't tell Rowan. He thinks I paid for everything. He doesn't know you've been helping with the baby shower, the nursery, this party. If he finds out, he'll lose it. He already thinks I'm terrible with money. Mallory inhaled slowly. That explained everything. Camille wasn't here because she cared. She wasn't here because she felt guilty. She was here because she was scared her web of lies would unravel. You didn't come to apologize, Mallory said, her voice now edged with steel. You came because your image is in danger. Camille's eyes welled with tears. Please. Mallory stared at her sister, the one she had protected, enabled, and covered for her whole life, and finally saw her for what she was, a person who had taken everything and offered nothing in return. She smiled softly. Sounds like a you problem, she repeated. Then closed the door. And this time, she locked it. The afternoon light had waned into a dull, overcast tone as Mallory returned to her small, sparsely furnished apartment. The earlier confrontation, cold and unyielding, still reverberated in her mind. Inside, silence seemed to echo louder than any noise her former life ever had. Her heart pounded with a mix of sorrow, relief, and lingering anger as she navigated the aftermath of severing ties with the family she once held dear. Mallory sat cross-legged on the worn-out couch, staring at the muted television that displayed a forgotten news report. The world outside went on as usual, oblivious to the upheaval unfolding within her. Just an hour earlier, Fiona, the sister who had been both a golden child and a master manipulator, had pounded on her door, desperate and teary-eyed. Now, the raw feelings elicited by that encounter refused to fade into trivial background noise. Every word, every call she had received since her firm decision echoed in her mind. For weeks, Mallory had silently borne the weight of responsibility. She remembered all the nights spent budgeting every penny, rations for her own survival sacrificed for the sake of Fiona's lavish tastes. In retrospect, the evidence was irrefutable. Fiona's phone calls filled with urgent financial crises, the unspoken demand that had become a norm over family reunions and celebratory events. There was one particular memory that stung most, the carefully orchestrated gender celebration, a day that had become a symbol of her exploitation. Mallory's hard-earned savings had transformed into candles, florals, and a photographer's schedule, and yet she was deliberately left out from what should have been a shared moment of family joy. As the memories swirled in the stagnant air of the living room, the chime of her phone broke the silence. It was a message notification. With a tentative breath, she opened her messaging app. A string of texts from various family members flashed across the screen, each carrying tones of beg, guilt, or disbelief. One message from her mother read, "We are all hurt, Mallory. Please call us back, everything is falling apart." Another from a cousin pleaded, "You're our rock. Don't leave us, we need you." Yet, as her eyes ran over the words, Mallory couldn't muster a response. No matter how hollow their apologies or insistent their pleas, the rejection had freed her from an unbalanced duty. A weariness settled over her. She recalled the disconcerting mixture of affection and entitlement that had defined her relationships with her family for so long. They had never cared about the sacrifices she endured. To them, she was simply the person whose job was to ensure that every grand plan got funded. At times, it almost felt like she had become an endless supply of money and energy, like an unregulated ATM machine that anyone could visit at will. And now, in this quiet aftermath, the realization was liberating: she was done. The sound of rain tapping on her window punctuated her solitude, as if nature itself mourned the collapse of the old order. She reached for a well-worn journal, its pages filled with the recollections of years of financial, emotional, and personal support given without reciprocation. It was there in scribbled margins and heartfelt notes that she documented every loan, every emergency, every sacrifice, a ledger of exploitation. One entry in particular resonated with clarity, a note about the gender celebration funds that Fiona had promised to repay eventually, a promise that never came. That ledger, more than any conversation, painted a grim picture of a lifetime's pattern. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the disregard for her self-worth. Every incident, no matter how trivial it might have seemed to others, had accumulated until it burst forth in a moment of defiant clarity. Mallory closed the journal, a subtle smile creeping across her face as she acknowledged the truth. She was reclaiming her identity, piece by piece, by refusing to be a pawn any longer. In the following hours, the fallout began to manifest. The phone continued to ring, persistent calls from her mother, pleading voice messages from relatives, and even an unexpected call from Fiona herself. Each ring was met with a long pause. Eventually, she turned off her phone notifications, deciding that silence might heal the internal scars better than futile exchanges. The cascade of calls and messages symbolized a world trying desperately to mend something that was already irreparably broken. That night, at a modest dinner she prepared from scratch, Mallory allowed herself a moment of reflective solitude. With a single bowl of soup and a slice of freshly baked bread, she sat at her rickety table with the window open to listen to the soft patter of rain outside. In that vulnerable quiet, thoughts of both the past and the present collided. Despite the persistent ache of betrayal, she recognized that this pain was not a punishment but a precursor to growth. The confrontation with Fiona was inevitable, an overdue reckoning. Her mind replayed the conversation from earlier, Fiona's voice trembling as she insisted that everything would be fixed, her words desperate and contrived. But Mallory realized that fix-it promises were just chains wrapped in sweetness, meant to keep her tethered to a toxic cycle. The psychological toll of many years of being overlooked and undervalued was heavy. Yet tonight, with a cup of chamomile tea warming her hands, she began to envision a future where she was neither the unpaid caregiver nor the endless source of her family's financial comfort. The taste of freedom was bittersweet, a mixture of regret, relief, and hope. The clock ticked on, and with every minute Mallory felt more detached from the world that had once defined her. She reflected on the series of events that had led her here, re-examining every subtle hint she had ignored over the years. The family dinners where her contributions were taken for granted, the calls made in haste when Fiona was in trouble, and the overwhelming pressure to be the indispensable one. Every memory bolstered her newfound resolve. There was a peculiar strength in acknowledging one's own worth, in finally saying no to a system built on exploitation. By midnight, Mallory found herself on her balcony, looking out over the city lights that shimmered like fragments of lost dreams. The urban hum below was a stark contrast to the personal quiet of her heart. In that moment, she made a silent promise to herself, to seek not just solitude, but also autonomy. No more late-night crises, no more rushed reimbursements, no more sacrificing parts of herself for obligations that were never mutually beneficial. The next morning, as the rain finally tapered off into a gentle mist, Mallory gathered her thoughts and set out to take practical steps toward her new life. She researched financial planning, establishing boundaries, and even considered therapy to navigate the years of emotional strain. Each action was a declaration of independence, a rejection of the past that had so thoroughly drained her. At work, she became more assertive, declining requests that vaguely demanded extra time or money without acknowledgement. Colleagues noted the change in her demeanor, a quiet confidence replacing the tired resignation that had once characterized her. The shift wasn't immediate, but it was palpable. Conversations became clearer and more direct, the implicit understanding that she was no longer obligated to mend every crisis became her new mantra. Yet, even as Mallory embraced her transformation, the repercussions continued. Fiona's voice occasionally echoed in her memory, sometimes over the phone, sometimes in the form of a hurried email calling for help. But each time, Mallory responded with measured calmness, reiterating that the choice had already been made. "I'm sorry, but I can't help with this," became her refrain, a gentle but firm line drawn in the sand. And with every refusal, the weight on her shoulders grew lighter. As weeks turned into months, the fallout slowly morphed into a new beginning. Friendships formed with those who truly valued her, while her family's persistent calls receded into the background noise of a life she was determined to reshape. Mallory found solace in small daily rituals, a morning jog in the park, an evening spent reading by candlelight, and the simple pleasure of enjoying a meal without the accompanying emotional turmoil. Each act was a quiet rebellion, a testament to the life she was choosing for herself. In the reflective silence of her solitude, Mallory came to understand that the fallout was not a wound to be hidden forever but a catalyst for lasting change. The echoes of the past would always be with her, yet they no longer defined her identity. With careful steps toward a future filled with balance and respect for her own needs, she embraced the idea that sometimes letting go is the only way to reclaim one's true self. As the city around her thrummed with the relentless pace of everyday life, Mallory sat on her balcony once more, this time with a notebook in her hands, jotting down the first lines of a new chapter. It wasn't a tale of revenge, but rather a note to self-discovery, a declaration that from the ashes of exploitation, she could build a world that was hers alone. And in that quiet resolve, amidst the gentle rustle of autumn leaves, she finally understood that the fallout was not an end, but the spark of a transformative beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Mallory severed ties with her family. The silence that followed was thunderous, loud in all the ways guilt tries to disguise itself. At first, she had expected a war. Instead, what she got was eerie calm. No knocks at the door. No letters. No dramatic confrontations. She almost believed they had accepted her choice. Almost. Until Derek called. She didn't recognize the number at first. It came through as unknown, and she nearly let it go to voicemail. But something inside her, curiosity, maybe, pushed her to pick up. "Hello?" A moment of silence. Then a voice she barely recognized, heavy with fatigue. "Mallory? It's Derek." Her sister's husband. She sat up straighter, her heart tightening with confusion. "Hi. What's going on? Can we talk?" he asked. "In person?" She hesitated. She had never been close to Derek. Their conversations had always been surface level, casual small talk during family gatherings. This wasn't just a coffee catch-up. This was different. "Sure," she said cautiously. "Where?" They met at a quiet corner cafe near the river. It was early evening, the golden hour casting long shadows through the window panes. Derek looked like he hadn't slept in days, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "She told me," he said without preamble, "about the money. About the party. About everything." Mallory raised an eyebrow. "She did?" He nodded, jaw tight. "Not all of it. Just enough that I started asking questions." Mallory leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "And what did you find out?" Derek's shoulders slumped. "That she's been taking advantage of you for years. That she lied to me, repeatedly. She told me she had saved up for the baby stuff. That she was managing things responsibly." He scoffed bitterly. "Turns out she was building our entire marriage on smoke and mirrors." For a while, neither of them spoke. The hum of conversation in the cafe created a cocoon of normalcy around them, but inside their little bubble, everything was unraveling. "She said you canceled the payment after the party," Derek finally said. Mallory stared at him. "No. I never paid it at all. She was supposed to. That was our agreement. I only paid the deposit." Derek's eyes flickered. "She told me you offered to cover the whole thing, then backed out last minute out of spite." A bitter laugh escaped Mallory's lips. "Of course she did." He didn't defend Camille. He didn't even seem surprised. Instead, he rubbed his hands over his face and muttered, "I should have seen this coming." Mallory's tone softened. "It's not your fault. She's good at pretending." He shook his head. "That's the thing. I ignored the signs. I wanted to believe the best in her. We're having a kid, for God's sake. I wanted to trust her." Mallory could see the pain etched into his face, not just betrayal, but deep, genuine disappointment. "What are you going to do?" she asked gently. "I don't know," he admitted. "I feel like everything I built was on someone else's dime." "On your dime?" She shook her head. "You didn't know. I let her use me. That's on me." He looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you." "For what?" "For waking me up." When Derek left, Mallory didn't feel vindicated. She didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted. As she walked home under the dim glow of streetlights, she thought about how easily trust could be twisted, how quickly love turned into debt. Camille hadn't just used her, she had lied to Derek too, built a marriage on a carefully curated illusion of independence. But the cracks were widening. And Mallory had stopped patching them. That night, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to sleep without her phone nearby, no ringer on, no notifications buzzing. Just silence. It didn't last. 3 days later, a knock on the door broke the stillness of a rainy evening. Mallory paused mid-sip of her tea, debating whether to answer. Curiosity got the better of her. She opened the door just slightly. Her mother stood on the other side, raincoat soaked, eyes filled with quiet determination. "We need to talk." Mallory sighed and stepped aside, allowing her mother into the apartment. They sat in silence for several minutes. Her mother glanced around the apartment, her expression unreadable. She hadn't been here in years, not since Mallory moved out on her own. "You embarrassed your sister," she finally said. Mallory's laugh was hollow. "She embarrassed herself. She's pregnant. She doesn't need this kind of stress." There it was again, the excuse. The expectation that Mallory would bend for the sake of family. "She told Derek everything," Mallory said flatly. "Not all of it. But enough." Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's between them." "No," Mallory snapped, the first crack in her composure. "That's between all of us. Because I was the one making her look like a responsible adult. I was the one paying the bills she pretended she covered. I was the one getting left out of the celebration I paid for." Her mother looked away. Mallory leaned forward, voice softening. "She never apologized. Not once. She just came to beg me to cover the rest so her lie wouldn't catch up to her." "She's scared," her mother said. "So was I," Mallory replied. But no one noticed. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, her mother exhaled and stood. "Fine. Do whatever you want. But don't expect us to come crawling back when you regret this." Mallory stood too, tilting her head. "Us?" Her mother flinched but said nothing. She simply walked out the door. And Mallory didn't follow. The days after that were quieter. But not because people weren't still trying to reach her. The calls continued. The guilt-tripping. The carefully phrased apologies that weren't really apologies. But she didn't respond. Until one evening, weeks later, her phone rang again, an unknown number. She nearly declined, but something inside her hesitated. She picked up. A long pause. Then a voice so small it was almost unrecognizable. It's me. Camille. Mallory's breath caught. I just wanted to say. I'm sorry, Camille said. Her voice cracked on the last word. For everything. Mallory remained silent. Derek left, Camille continued, barely above a whisper. He moved out. Mallory exhaled slowly. She didn't feel joy or satisfaction. Just inevitability. He said he can't trust me, Camille went on. And Mom and Dad, they said I need to figure this out on my own. They won't help me. Mallory almost laughed at the irony. For years, she had been the only one helping. Now, when Camille needed someone, suddenly their parents had discovered boundaries. I don't know what to do, Camille whispered. Mallory closed her eyes. I'm sorry, Camille. I really am. But I can't fix this. Please, Mallory. She ended the call. Camille never called again. And Mallory never looked back. Spring arrived slowly, with budding trees lining the sidewalks and sunlight lingering just a little longer each evening. In Mallory's world, though, the change of season was more than just a shift in the weather, it was a symbolic shedding, a rebirth. It had been nearly 3 months since the last call from Camille. 3 months of silence. 3 months of stillness. For the first time in her life, Mallory wasn't tangled in someone else's chaos. She wasn't rushing to save anyone from their latest crisis, wasn't constantly checking her account balance to see if she could afford to bail someone out. Her apartment was finally her own sanctuary. The air was lighter. Her shoulders, freer. But peace comes with its own shadows. Some nights, lying awake in her quiet home, guilt would whisper from the corners. The familiar voice in her head, her mother's tone, Camille's accusatory stares, the sharp "you're overreacting" would echo, asking, have you gone too far? Is family really worth abandoning? But then she would remember. She'd remembered standing in her sister's living room, holding a wine glass while looking at photos of a party she hadn't been invited to, the same party she had paid for. She'd remember her mother's disapproving face, more concerned with Camille's embarrassment than Mallory's pain. She'd remember years of invisible labor, of every thankless act spun as obligation. And she would roll over and sleep again, peacefully. One evening, Mallory wandered through the aisles of her local grocery store, idly browsing. Her cart was filled with the kinds of things she never used to buy for herself: lavender soap, fancy crackers, a candle shaped like a blooming peony. Small luxuries. Simples of a life where her money finally served her. As she rounded the tea aisle, a familiar voice halted her in her tracks. Mallory? She turned slowly. Her mother stood there, holding a box of chamomile in one hand and a shopping basket in the other. She looked older. Tired. Her eyes searched Mallory's face with something between guilt and hesitation. You look good, her mother said, like the words physically hurt to say. Mallory just nodded. Would you like to grab a coffee? Her mother asked. Surprise flickered through Mallory. She hesitated, then nodded. At the small cafe on the corner, they sat facing each other in the warmth of afternoon light, the tension thick between them. I miss you, her mother began quietly. Mallory stirred her coffee. I miss the idea of family, she said. But I don't miss feeling used. Her mother flinched but didn't argue. That was new. Camille's struggling, she said, like testing fragile ice with her voice. Mallory gave a small shrug. That's not my problem anymore. A long silence. Maybe it could be, if you wanted it to be, her mother tried. Mallory gave a short laugh and leaned back. There it is. Her mother's expression faltered. You miss me, sure. But what you really miss is what I used to do for Camille, Mallory said. You want me to sweep in and save her. Again. No, her mother protested softly. Well, yes. But we're family. You always told me family looks out for each other, Mallory said. But it turns out, that only applied when I was doing the looking. Her mother stared at the cup between her hands. You don't understand. Camille, she's a grown woman who's never had to face consequences. Until now, Mallory said evenly. And now you want me to absorb them again, just so she doesn't have to learn. I won't. A deep silence fell. Her mother opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Mallory stood, leaving a few bills on the table. You always said family takes care of each other, she repeated, looking her mother dead in the eyes. Maybe it's time you take care of Camille. I'm done. She left the cafe without looking back. And this time, it didn't hurt. Weeks rolled into months. Mallory traveled to cities she'd always wanted to visit. She learned to make her own pasta from scratch. She joined a pottery class and made lopsided mugs that made her smile. Her apartment felt like a home, a safe place, a space that bore no echoes of obligation or judgment. There were moments, of course, when she thought about them, her mother, Camille, the cousins who had once texted her only when someone needed a loan. But the thoughts came like passing clouds. Not storms. Not anchors. Then, one quiet Thursday evening, she received a message. Not from her mother. Not from Camille. From Derek. Derek, hey. I just wanted to say thank you. She stared at the screen. Mallory, for what? Derek, for opening my eyes. I should have seen what was happening. I should have seen how she used you. How she used me. I'm sorry I didn't. Mallory's throat tightened, not with pain, but with something gentler. Recognition. Maybe even peace. Mallory, you don't owe me an apology. But thank you for saying it. A pause. Derek, take care of yourself. And that was it. No drama. No begging. No guilt. Just closure. Mallory didn't know if Camille ever got her life together. She didn't know if her parents ever realized the damage they had done, or if they just carried on believing Mallory had abandoned them. But for the first time, she didn't care. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't sad. She wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. She had created a life where she could wake up and breathe. A life where every dollar she spent went toward her dreams. Where she no longer had to tiptoe around other people's emotions, or bend her boundaries to keep the peace. She wasn't the backup plan. She wasn't the family ATM. She wasn't invisible. She was Mallory. And she was finally free.